Every year, the world generates over 2 billion tons of solid waste. This is according to the World Bank. And at least a third of that isn't managed in an environmentally safe manner. On top of that, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened our waste pollution problem. On an individual level, just think about how much more plastic we're using because of the pandemic. Face masks, face shields, which we absolutely need, the bubble wrap for your e-commerce packages, the takeout containers for all that food that you've been ordering and having delivered to your home. So what can organizations and individuals do to address this waste problem that's been compounded by COVID? Well, recycling is one of the easiest and most effective methods to reduce waste, conserve the environment, and address climate change. Recycling is also considered the seventh resource by the Global Recycling Foundation. It's just as important as water, air, oil, natural gas, coal, and minerals. So to celebrate Global Recycling Day, this session of Business World Insights will tackle the importance of recycling to our warming planet, as well as ethical, sustainable, and proper methods of plastic and waste management. I'm Samuel Marcelo, Business World's multimedia editor, your host and moderator for this morning. Today, we have two industry leaders who play significant roles in advancing proper waste management in the country. Let's welcome on screen Attorney Joseph Fabul, Country Manager for Corporate and Government Affairs of Mondelez Philippines, and Crispian Lau, co-convener and founding president of the Philippine Alliance for Recycling and Materials Sustainability, or PARMS. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi, Sam. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner Crispian.
Yeah, good morning, Sam. Good morning, Joseph. Nice to see you guys again.
Thanks for joining us this morning. All right, so kicking off this discussion is Attorney Joseph Fabul, who is going to talk about sustainable snacking, plastic packaging recycling, and waste management. Attorney Fabul assumed the role of Country Manager for Corporate and Government Affairs of Mondelez Philippines and joined its management team in December 2020. Prior to assuming that post, he was Senior Manager for the Corporate Affairs Department of Philip Morris International, known locally as PMFTC Inc., where he focused on regulatory affairs and illicit trade prevention. Okay, Attorney Fabul, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Sam. Well, the purpose of Mondelez is to empower people to snack right by providing the right snack for the right moment and made the right way. So when Mondelez says that we make snacks the right way, what exactly do we mean? Well, first, we make snacks using sustainable ingredients. Second, we ensure that our manufacturing processes continue to evolve in order to reduce the environmental impact of our operations. In fact, in our Sukat Parañaque factory, where we've been operating for the last 58 years, all our energy, 100% of the energy that's used in that factory is from renewable sources. That's our commitment to sustainability. Third, we also make sure that we continue to innovate in terms of packaging material. And that's why in 2018, we made a commitment to ensure that 100% of our packaging material is recycle ready. And the good news is, to date, we're already 94% compliant with that commitment. 94% of our packaging material is already recycle ready. Number 4, we also monitor and perform our due diligence checks to prevent labor, child labor, and human rights abuses across our supply chain. So this is the sort of sustainability commitment that Mondelez Philippines has. And we look forward to discussing recycling and proper waste management in this forum. Back to you, Sam.
Okay, so thank you, Attorney Fabul. Sustainable snacking. That doesn't make me feel so guilty about munching on snacks anymore. And yes, I look forward to our discussion later. So our next guest is Crispian Lau. Commissioner Crispian Lau is the Vice Chairman of the National Solid Waste Management Commission under the Office of the President and the private sector representative for the recycling industry. He is the founding president of PARMS, as mentioned earlier. Good morning, Mr. Lau.
Good morning,
Mr. Lau, Yeah. Hey, so Mr. Lau, last year, PARMS launched an initiative towards reducing plastic waste and promoting sustainable waste management. Please tell us about this initiative, which I believe is called Zero Waste to Nature Ambition 2030, and how we can participate in developing a roadmap for sustainable waste management.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Before I go into the program proper of Zero Waste to Nature Ambition 2030, let me give you a brief background. No? In a developing country like the Philippines, where we have been ranked as the third biggest contributor to marine litter, we found that the gap really is on the infrastructure. The infrastructure that allows us to have a more circular model in the economy that we are in, especially for the packaging and products. And of course, focus would be on plastic. And with this in mind, we put our acts together, we put industry together, all stakeholders now have merged under PARMS to declare our Zero Waste to Nature Ambition 2030 declaration. Now, we made that declaration last year in January with the DNR and also with the Senate. And the objective of our Zero Waste to Nature campaign is that none of our plastic packaging, okay, and other forms of packaging should end up as waste. We took an ambitious goal of setting short, medium, and long-term targets towards 2030 to take this away from the environment and, more importantly, to convert this into resources. So the objective would actually gear towards the design of the materials, the reduction of hard to recycle materials, and redesign of these materials so that it becomes recyclable, as what Joseph was mentioning earlier, and develop the infrastructure to address the waste that is generated at the end of its life. Bottom line, we would like to understand more the materials, set the volumes, and develop clear pathways for these materials so that it won't end up as litter or as waste in our nature. Back to you, Sam.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Lau, for sharing. So that puts the pressure on corporations and organizations, I guess. 2030, are we gonna get there? All right. So I think now we can move on to the discussion. So proper waste management really is a global challenge. In the Philippines, I believe several laws have been passed and ordinances and improvements have already been implemented. But I think we can all agree that there are still lots of issues that have to be addressed. Mr. Lau, could you give us your thoughts on the state of Philippine waste management right now? And like, as you mentioned, there are short, medium, and long-term goals. So what can be improved?
Well, the Philippines generates about 44,000 tons of waste on a daily basis. In Metro Manila, it's about 10,000 tons. And if you look at it per capita basis, it's about zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.7, depending on where you are. We have one of the most beautiful laws and most comprehensive laws on solid waste management. The real challenge is, as many available laws of the land, is the implementation side of it. And why is that? Because government lacks the infrastructure. And obviously, you need financing for infrastructure. And this is where the private sector can pitch in by putting up the necessary infrastructure in partnership with all stakeholders, not only government, including civil society and the general public, so that we can actually put the necessary infrastructure to address waste management and to prevent leakage to the environment.
It's so nice to hear that we have beautiful laws. So it's just there, like waiting to be implemented. Okay, so Attorney Fabel, would you like to add something to that as someone who represents the private sector?
Well, we agree completely with Commissioner Crispian. It's very hard to add to what Commissioner Crispian said. He is the subject matter expert, but we were very surprised when we read the Ocean Conservancy report saying that 74% of marine leakage comes from waste that has already been collected. And that's quite shocking. Imagine 74% of the marine litter that's found was already from waste that we already had and collected. I mean, doesn't that show and prove the gaps and loopholes that Commissioner Crispian mentioned? We need to improve the infrastructure, the funding, and probably the education and information campaign for recycling and waste management. I was also shocked to hear and watch that recent BBC report about the Philippines. I think it came out a few days ago. There were divers, scuba divers, and people living in the coastal areas who reported that they're seeing increased number of face masks and plastic personal protective equipment, and these are single-use plastics, and they're seeing an increasing number of them in our oceans. And it's probably because we're required to wear them, and it's really a requirement due to the pandemic. But from there, you can see that an essential, unnecessary single-use plastic like face masks and gloves and plastic gloves still end up in our oceans. It means that there's really a problem in the collection, segregation of solid waste material. It's not It's not the fault of plastic. I mean, we always hear about stories on how we should ban single-use plastics, but there's a whole spectrum of single-use plastics, and you can include face masks and PPEs in there, and they still end up in our oceans. So that's actually proof that there's a solid waste management issue and not a plastic issue. Back to you, Sam.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I guess now we know that your sentiments on single-use plastics. But I would like you, sir, to expound more, because there's this sentiment against single-use plastic among Filipinos, even among policymakers. So is a general plastic ban a step in the right direction towards, say, sustainable waste management? What are your thoughts on a blanket ban? If you could expound, sir, on your previous answer, Attorney Fabul.
It's good that you mentioned that, Sam. There are many pending bills in both houses of Congress right now calling for for a single-use plastics ban, or an absolute ban, or a tax, or a stricter regulation on the use of plastic. So everyone would like to reduce how we use plastics, but I think first we need to define the necessary and unnecessary types of plastics, because there are plastics that we need, and there are also plastics that have no viable commercial and large scale alternatives. So how do you replace them? But I'm sure perhaps later Commissioner Lau will be in a better position to explain all of that. But from our part, from the part of a food manufacturer, we believe that the plastic packaging that we use is very essential. Plastic packaging is a very flexible material. It provides us with the right levels of security, quality, product protection, and preservation that's needed to maintain the integrity of our food. Um, I'd like you to try and imagine this. You go into a grocery or supermarket and you take away all the food that's wrapped or packed in plastic packaging, and what will you be left with? Very little. Maybe the canned, or those in cans or glass containers. But everything else is stored in plastic packaging because it's able to protect the integrity and quality of the food. You don't want the food to spoil. You don't want the food to be you don't want the food to be subject to infestation, or you don't want it to gather dust. I mean, from the point that the food that's packed in plastic packaging travels from the factory to the warehouse to the trucks, planes, boats, It needs to maintain that integrity to ensure that the food is edible and it won't spoil. So for a food manufacturer like us, plastic packaging is actually indispensable to ensure that our consumers get the proper quality of food and food that is safe to eat. If there were a commercially viable, large-scale alternative to the use of plastic packaging for food, then we are more than willing to make that commitment. But as of now, I don't think there's really a sustainable way to store food other than the way it's being stored now through plastic packaging. And the key really here is to recognize this fact and to move forward and to see that food packaging, food plastic packaging is necessary and that we can still reduce the impact, the environmental impact of plastic packaging through recycling, reusing, or co-processing the post-consumer plastic waste. So I join the sentiment of our legislators in recognizing that plastic needs to be managed, but a ban on single-use plastics, especially food packaging, I think we need to rethink that policy. We need to explore other options and perhaps see if this is really a good idea because we might be creating a totally different problem by going through this route. So there, back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Attorney Fabo. So that image of a grocery without products in plastic packaging is quite vivid. It brings up the point, I think, that the Philippines is what they call a sachet economy. Mr. Lau, same question, please. Given that we've been called a sachet economy, is a complete plastic ban sustainable from your perspective?
Well, if you remove plastics from the system, the big question and the real question is what are the alternatives available now that meets the purpose of packaging, which is to serve and to protect, not only for food, but for also other applications. You know, when you look at packaging in its entire life cycle, the advantage of plastic is not only its ability to protect the content, to protect wastage, its ability, and because it's so light, that it reduces cost for transport, greenhouse gas emissions from transport. You know, these are key elements in the overall view of environment discussions. Now, we do recognize that the real problem is at the post-use stage, which is the end of life. You know, and this is something that really needs to be addressed. Are bans the solution? Well, it's a shortcut solution, but would it be effective? You know, name me a country that has posed a ban and stopped the leakage. You know, it has to complement each other. You need to first discipline our general public to properly dispose of their waste. You need to ensure that the waste that is collected by the local government unit goes to where it's supposed to go. You know, the reality is that only 30% of our local government units have access to material recovery facilities where materials should actually go so that you enhance recycling and composting. You know, only 24% to date of our local government units has access to sanitary landfills as disposal facilities. So there's this really big gap. Now, given that we are a sachet economy, given that the sachet economy is a form where people get access to branded goods at the least cost while maintaining safety. You know, do we remove that from the system? And you have to understand also what would be the socio-economical economic impact. Okay, the question is, what would be the socio-economic impact of a ban to those who live by the day? You know, sachets are designed for poor communities, you know, for the lower income bracket of our society. But then we do need to transition and look for other better options. While those options are not yet here, it is important to look for solutions, and that's where we are right now, and that is where we want to set our targets towards zero waste.
Okay, so what I'm getting is like a ban is a band-aid solution and not really what we need right now. We have to think big picture and improve infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Lau.
Yeah, let
Could
me
you, yeah,
yeah, let me
yes,
add to
please.
that some, no.
Sure.
Let's look at the current experiences. There are local government units that have already done some bans or regulations on plastics, no. Um, there are cities that already ban plastic bags. There are cities that have taken out styrofoam or foam PS from the market. What are the substitutes? What do we do with the substitutes? Right? The substitutes are in alternatives that are also disposable. And given that the country has lack of infrastructure to properly dispose of waste, it causes more strain to a system that is lacking already. So it has to be viewed holistically.
Okay. Thank you for giving that like bird's eye view of, you know, of what's happening. Sir, could you also explain the concept of a circular economy? I think you touched on this. So, what has to happen for the Philippines to transition to this kind of economic system?
Yeah. Circular economy is a model where, instead of taking from natural resources, using it and disposing it after its end of life, linear. That means that you take, you use, you dispose. We need to transition by taking back the resource of that material. Meaning, you take from natural resources, you use it, okay, then you recover the end of life material so that you can turn it back into the system and create a resource out of it. So you want to make it circular. And to be able to meet circularity or transition towards a circular economy, it is important that all key stakeholders pitch in. You know, First, we need to design our packaging and our products to make it more recyclable, more recoverable. The consumers need to participate in segregation. We need to segregate so that these materials will not be so contaminated that it's so difficult to manage at the end of its life. Then the government needs to ensure that these wastes are properly collected and sent to the necessary recycling or treatment facilities. This is the way we can achieve circular economy. And with circular economy, we also meet SDG 12 goals of sustainable consumption and production, uh, and take care of our environment, and more importantly, make full use of our resources.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lau. So, we all have to pitch in. So, given that, Attorney Fabul, what is Mondelez Philippines' take on the circular economy and waste management? How are you preparing for it? What measures have you already taken?
Thanks, Sam. Well, the company is committed to the circular economy model. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we are planning to have our plastic packaging to be 100% recyclable or recycle ready by 2025. I think the commitment starts really from the producer. So we have to make sure that the plastic packaging that we use and eventually goes out there has the potential to be recycle ready, so that the next step will be actually the partnerships, the public-private partnerships between the various stakeholders for post-consumer plastic waste. We need to enter into public-private partnerships like what we've done with Palms, with the Plastic Credit Exchange, with the Plastic Flamingo. All these organizations help us ensure that the post-consumer plastic waste that's out there is collected, segregated, and eventually recycled or co-processed. um, I think when you say circular economy, it's really about closing the loop. It's about ensuring that the packaging that you have is sustainable, and then as it goes through its entire life cycle, when it's used for its primary purpose, it's eventually collected and segregated, and then it's able to be used for a secondary purpose, either for to create it, to use it as raw material for another product, or in order for it to be used to process the production of another product. So when you talk about circular economy, it's really about the loop and completing that loop. And Mondelez supports this initiative.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Fowle. And again, I guess to close the loop, we're gonna need the infrastructure. So it's also like
Yeah. And yeah, if I may add to that, Sam, if I may
yes.
add to that, Sam, this is the reason why zero waste to nature came in. This is not just a plain declaration that we're signing on paper. We are currently in the process of linking the whole chain together for more circularity, for increased recycling. We have already set categories. On the ideal scenario, we want full recycling of the materials, and what we cannot recycle, that is the only one that would go to treatment or co-processing. So that's how we are modeling the whole system right now. And in the process also, we want to identify the volumes and identify the infrastructure gaps. Now, once we have identified the infrastructure gaps, that is where now private investments can come in, right? So that you fill in those gaps, so that you develop that circular model out of the whole economy.
Okay,
Back to you,
thank
Sam.
you, Mr. Lau. Yeah, thank you. I would like to just raise 2 points again. Like these were already mentioned a while ago. So, Mr. Lau, going back to the country's sachet economy and how it's been criticized as one of the primary reasons that the Philippines ranks as one of the world's top polluters. This goes into a couple of studies from 2015 that ranked the Philippines as the third worst contributor to plastic waste in the ocean. I believe one was published in the journal Science, and the other was by McKinsey. And Attorney Fabo mentioned this also a while ago. So are these studies accurate, Mr. Lau, or are there like angles to it that we're not seeing? And if so, like what do we have to do,
Yeah, thank
Mr.
you,
Lau?
Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for that very difficult question. No, uh, okay. The
It's all yours,
2015.
Commissioner.
Okay, let me try to respond to it, because I do a lot of I do a lot of peer reviews, so that makes it difficult for me. I also participate in a lot of studies. No, if you look at the 2015 study by by Jambeck and her team, from the U.S., that's University of Georgia. When you look at that study, the study used a lot of assumptions, and because there's lack of data from developing countries, they just simply use some assumptions. Now, whether those assumptions are accurate for the Philippines to be ranked as number three is a longer discussion. Maybe we'll need a session to do that. However, the basis of uh, waste management, coastline, and population, I felt was not a good basis for the ranking system. You have to consider that the Philippines has one of the lowest per capita consumption of plastic. We have a very long coastline that has a potential for leakage. And we also have a big population compared to our other ASEAN neighbors. Uh, uh, that being given, the Ocean Conservancy report actually used the Jambeck report as a reference. No? That was 2018. And you see, but what's more important is these two reports point to the importance of waste management to address the leakage problem. Yeah. And it also highlights the importance of governments and the private sector putting the proper infrastructure to prevent leakage, because yes, as Attorney Joseph said, no, that a lot of these things in the Philippines had already been collected, but then it leaks again. So you have to put the proper infrastructure to ensure that the leakage does not happen after it is collected. So these are the factors that really comes into place. No? We don't agree with the numbers, but we do agree that there's a long way and a lot of room for us to improve solid waste management in the Philippines. Sam?
Okay. Thank you for that. So I had to ask this question because these studies have been cited over and over again. And the emphasis is always that we're third, we're third, we're third. So instead of
Yep.
thinking we're third, okay, we should be focusing on yes, we need to improve our waste management, and yes, we do have to address the lack of infrastructure. Okay. Attorney Fabo, would you like to add something to Mr. Lau's response? Would you like to jump in?
We agree with Commissioner Crispian. We know that we're not where we want to be right now in terms of solid waste management, and we have some way to go. We have to recognize that first. Yes, there are some questions as to the report, but let's be honest, there's still room for improvement. The Ecological Solid Waste Management Act has been around for decades. I mean, I think over 2 decades already. Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Crispian. And he already mentioned earlier that there's still some ways to go in order for its full implementation, or in order for the intention of our legislators to be fully realized through that law. And perhaps maybe that's what we should look at. I mean, what percent, I mean, if the law has certain KPIs that need to be performed, how much of that has already been attained? I mean, why are we looking to pass so many other new laws when the first beautiful law, as the way Commissioner Crispian describes it, hasn't been fully operationalized yet? And perhaps that's what we should look into. The reports ranking the Philippines as number three, and saying this and that, you know, that's the report. But we also need to look at ourselves, right? I mean, how far have we gone to implementing what's already there? And perhaps we can see where the problem really is. Thanks, Sam.
Okay. I mean, thank you, Attorney Fabo. I mean, all we have to do is look around. We'll see that there is a waste problem. Just walk around the city and you'll see it. So, on another note, gentlemen, what are your thoughts on innovations and developments that can turn plastic waste into fuel? Do you think that this is feasible for the Philippines? Mr. Lau, perhaps you can answer first, and then we'll proceed to Attorney Fabo after.
Yes, waste to fuel is one of the options. Of course, on an ideal scenario, you bring it back to its original state. But waste to fuel is something that we are also looking at. You see, transport costs in the Philippines is so expensive. And a lot of recycling facilities are in Metro Manila and in other major cities like Cebu, Davao, and Cagayan de Oro. So for us to transport these resources back to the recycling facilities is a bigger challenge because inter-island shipping costs in this country is so expensive. So when you look at other options like fuels, you see, imagine this: if you can bring the materials, we do bring the materials to an island. What if we convert these materials in the island and use the fuels to run the bankas that ply the route? Then it makes it more circular in that sense. And I think these are also very feasible options that are available to us. And we are looking at those things as part of the roadmap that we are currently developing under the ZWTN. And we believe that this can be made feasible. What is important is to have also laws and regulations that would complement the existing law and give room for all this infrastructure to be put in place. You have to ensure that the feedstock is there. If I were to invest into a waste to fuel from a business point of view, if I were to invest in a waste to fuel facility, I need to be assured that the plastic will be there for me to continue to convert it into fuel. If the feedstock would not be there, then what will I run? How would I recover my investment from an investment point of view? So again, we need to have clear-cut policies and more sound policies to put this infrastructure in place.
Thank you, Commissioner. Attorney Fabo, would you like to take a stab at the question?
Yes.
Wait.
Well, when you of course, we support the circular economy model. I mean, this is how we see things. This is how we see things going in the future through circular economy. But there are other processes right now that are available to governments and to different corporations, and we have to take a step back and look what we can manage and do right now. If waste to fuel is the only way to be able to process certain types of plastics, and it's economically viable and available, then I think we should try and explore this opportunity as well, in parallel to the circular economy model. But we should try and find new and innovative ways to recycle or process post-consumer plastic waste.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Fabul, I'll throw this question to you since we've been going to Mr. Lau first for the previous question. So this one is to you. Speaking from experience, sir, so what can private businesses do to become more environmentally friendly? How can they manage their waste sustainably? Big question, I know.
Okay. Well, maybe first, let's look to ourselves. I mean, maybe you start small. Have something, have a recycling drive in the office. Generate that level of awareness and understanding within the company. Develop that sustainable and recycling mindset from within. Help our colleagues understand the importance of recycling and how we can contribute through our individual recycling efforts. So maybe you can have a recycling drive in your office. You can the people in the office can collect at home and drop off the recyclable materials, and then I don't know, they get points or recognition for that, or of course that shouldn't be required, but it's a way to incentivize it. And then you have programs to educate and inculcate that sort of behavior within the corporation, and that's from an internal level. Externally, well, there you go back to innovation, product innovation, packaging innovation. Ensure that what you have can be recycled, and that's what Mondelez has committed to do by 2025. Also enter into partnerships with organizations. It's actually very timely. A few weeks ago, we entered into an agreement with this social enterprise called the Plastic Flamingo, wherein we will be recycling around 40 metric tons of post-consumer plastic waste and turning them into eco bricks. And these eco bricks or eco lumber will be used to create disaster relief shelters, which we hope to donate to the local government unit of Parañaque, where we operate. We also partnered with Plastic Credit Exchange to process 130 metric tons of post-consumer plastic waste in order to ensure that this doesn't end up in our oceans. Um, we also have a global program for sustainable futures. And through this global program, we're able to pinpoint, recognize, and provide partnerships and funding for sustainable initiatives involving recycling. And we're able to partner with various social enterprises. So you start from the level of you start from the grassroots level. You educate your colleagues in the office. You move higher by implementing policies from within, enacting programs, providing funding for those programs, and then you just keep scaling up until you're able to create that culture and company that recognizes the importance of sustainability, solid waste management, recycling, and from there we can hope that in our own small way we can influence and make a difference to what's happening outside, to the solid waste management issue outside of the company. Because this issue, it's not just our problem. It's and we're not and the solution can't be found with one company or with one industry or with one organization. It's a multi-stakeholder problem that requires a multi-stakeholder solution. There's no silver bullet answer to the problem of solid waste management, and we all need to get together and work towards mitigating this or eventually solving this issue.
Okay, thank you, attorney, for reminding us that a big problem can be solved by starting small and by looking within. But what is important is that we realize that we have to start somewhere. And at the corporate level, as you mentioned, it's about creating a culture and looking for partners who can help realize your goals when it comes to waste management. Mr. Lau, your take on this? How can private companies manage their waste sustainably?
Well, I think yes, it all starts with education. We need to educate everyone across the whole value chain on the importance of proper waste management. Uh, we need to inculcate into our let's start with the companies, with the personnel. They need to understand how important it is for us to do the right thing, for us to be disciplined, for us to do the right thing. And I think from there we can actually uh, start small, start and set realistic targets. um, I had always advocated that companies start with a solid waste management plan within their respective organizations, so that all the employees and, if possible, their value chain, their supply chain are also educated in what needs to be done and how to do it. Develop a program. Once you have done that, then that can trickle also. It is important also for companies, to engage in activities that would remove all these packaging materials. Accountability for companies is very important. And for farms and for the members, we support, accountability amongst the stakeholders, amongst the manufacturers as well. And we do believe that we do believe and we understand that we need to do something with the products that we put and packaging that we put in the market, and we need to find a way to recover that. We have to start small. Realistic targets are very important, and then we slowly evolve. And with companies taking the lead, like Mondelez, then I see the bright light in the horizon, wherein if we start with some big companies taking the lead and others following behind them very soon, understanding how they do it, reduce the cost of doing all of this, then I believe and I strongly believe that we can have a better and cleaner future for us.
That's nice. Okay, so to summarize that, what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Lau, is that we have to be realistic and we have to be accountable
Yep.
for ourselves. So waste management really is a collective social responsibility. You've already spoken about what can be done on a company level. Let's go down, as you said, to the grassroots, to the individual level. So what can I do to contribute to the effort towards sustainable waste management? Who wants to take this first? Like on an individual level.
Okay. All right. On an individual level, first is, you see, the consumer has the power of choice. And I always say that, you have to make your choices responsibly. You know, those who can afford should not be buying items in small packages simply because it's convenient. Try to buy in bulk. Try to reduce, be conscious and reduce the amount of waste that we generate. So avoidance. Then you practice 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Now, if you cannot avoid packaging and there's still waste at the end of the day after you practice avoidance, reduce, reuse, recycle, then properly dispose of the materials. And I would also say that go for products and packaging that has sustainable programs also. I think we need to transition, and all of this can be achieved through proper education.
Thank you. Oh, you're smiling. What is that smile? Attorney Pablo, would you like to
No,
add
it's
to
no, I
Mr.
don't.
Lau's answer, please?
That's there's nothing I can add to that. It's that's really the key. Avoidance, and then the three R's. I think
Got you.
we just need to realize that we all have a personal stake on the environmental impact that poor solid waste management creates. It affects all of us. And in fact, we also have the power, the individual power to mitigate or try and solve that problem. Um, if we all just do what Commissioner Crispian mentioned, I think we will be able to greatly reduce the environmental impact of waste. And so go out there, try to avoid buying excessively. Only buy what you need and in the right packaging. Um, Try to reuse, recover, recycle, and let's just try to educate each other on the impact that our purchases make. Um, Sometimes even at home, it's more convenient to just throw everything out and not segregate. We don't we don't segregate what's recyclable. We don't segregate the non-recyclables, the reusables. So it really starts at home. And maybe you can even start with the kids to in order to educate them and to let them see how the plastic material can be reused or recycled. And this is a bit off topic because we have one project, the Joy Schools program, where we partnered with four public schools, and we were able to use around 1,000 kilos of plastic to create playgrounds, right? So the kids were the ones who collected the plastic, the kids and their parents, as well as their teachers. They collected the plastic waste, they turned it over to us, and then we converted it into playgrounds that they use in their schools. I mean, what better way to teach the children, to educate them about how you can reuse plastic than by having a program like that? Really, education is the key. And in order to help them understand what we can do, uh, what we can do in order to recycle and to reuse the plastic that we're using.
Thanks for sharing that example. Plastic waste into playgrounds. That's great. You can actually see the results of your, recycling efforts. And that, yes, we have to keep reminding ourselves that we have a personal stake in this because, we have only one planet. So
Sam,
let's, yes,
Sam, let me add
yes,
to that.
of course.
You see, no, we started with consumption. When the power to purchase, the choices that we make on purchasing. One simple thing that each and every one of us can do is, as we mentioned, segregation. Separate your food waste. Yeah, that's key. You know why? Food is the waste that's going to rot, that would stink, that is wet. If you are able to do one small step for us now, today, separate all the food apart from all other waste, you're making a difference already. Why? Because once that food waste contaminates all other waste, there's a lot more waste that would stink in your backyard, and if the hauler does not collect it, you'd have more of a problem. Try this one simple step, and that will benefit you. Then once you have done that, let's transition to doing segregation, recycling, all that, all the other components of segregation.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. So, viewers, this is one very simple thing that you can do right now. Separate your food waste. That's it. Start
Yeah.
there. It's very doable, guys. Okay. So let's wrap up this session with a key takeaway from both gentlemen. One thing you'd like viewers to remember from this discussion, from all the things that we've discussed. Let's start with Mr. Lau, please.
Well, again, we all have a role to play. Um, the government needs to implement the laws. Our legislators would need to come up with implementable and realistic regulation laws and regulations to address the problem. The manufacturers has a responsibility to ensure that what we put in the market is not only safe but also considerate of its end of life option, considering that all these materials would not end up as litter. And more importantly, the consumers, you and I, have a role to play in this system wherein we have to avoid littering, we have to dispose of our waste properly, we have to segregate, you know, whether we are at the office, at the workplace. These are key elements that we need to do if we are able to help each other. And we need also civil society to help us communicate all of these things to keep industry on its toes. If we put all our acts together, we can make a very big difference to address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lau. So for zero waste to nature in 2030 to happen, we all need to take part. Attorney Fabo, your
Yeah.
turn, sir.
Well, for Mondelez, our sustainable packaging strategy tackles the issue of plastics recyclability proactively. And we do this through three key interventions designed to close the gap and help to create a more circular plastics economy. So when I talk about three key interventions, it's really about innovative design, innovative packaging design, enabling recycling, and engaging our consumers. So for the innovative packaging design, Mondelez has already been, I think, very responsible in this regard. We're nearly 100% compliant, and we aim to be by 2025. By enabling recycling, we also help provide the infrastructure or assist the institutions engaged in recycling or co-processing. We need to partner with them, help fund them, help provide the materials for recycling, and also provide that level of awareness that this sort of facility is available to the public and to other corporations. We also need to engage our consumers, just as we discussed earlier, in order to broaden their awareness on sustainability, recycling, and solid waste management. It's not really it's the responsibility of the corporation, but it's not their sole responsibility. The corporations, the industries, government, and individuals all need to work together in order for this sustainable plastic strategy to come in full circle. Um, we provide these educational campaigns. We participate in different events in order to broaden their knowledge, and we also participate in various industry associations in order to let people know about how they can contribute and how they can support a more circular economy.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Fabul. All right. Once again, thank you to our experts for this valuable discussion. Thank you, Attorney Joseph Fabul, and thank you, Mr. Crispian Lau. Thank you also to our partners, Mondelez Philippines and the Philippine Star. And of course, our gratitude to everyone who joined us today. We all have a role to play in protecting our planet. So please follow Business World's social media pages to be updated on our next projects. Again, this is Samuel Marcelo, and this has been Business World Insights. Stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy, and separate your food waste.